Hello guys, this is your friend Shinobi Addict 2.0 and we're back with a new fanfic. Which is, what if Naruto had a harem with Kushina and the female Nine Tails without being in Uzumaki or Namikaze Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. The whole populace of the Uzumaki clan looked at the cloaked form of their very own Uzumaki D. Naruto in shock, after a year being on his year-long mission. The man before them didn't look like he changed one bit from the year that had passed by. The only true differences they could see different about him was the facial features of his face. His eyes had flecks of a golden yellow within them. The last thing was the aura he expelled. It was like nothing from a year ago. The last time they were around him his aura just felt so chaotic and uncontrollable. Like a ticking time bomb ready to explode, but now his aura just showed how calm he was. It's like not even if an attack happened would change his posture one bit. Though many recognize the cloak on his body since it was the same one from that man. The man who has most of the hidden villages on edge, but to them was in reality a living legend. Linking the two together many went wide-eyed or just plain lost their posture. Iroh was in the same predicament. Here his adopted nephew just returned. Only to look just like the very man that is the most wanted shinobi in the elemental nations. Looking at Kushina's smiling face, Naruto grinned before looking around himself to see the shocked crowd of his clan and gave a wave. Yo! With that, the most casual wave from probably the most dangerous man in the elemental nations, made the whole Uzumaki clan face fall all in unison. Seeing this not only Kushina, but Naruto both outright laughed. Ha 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 ha. 2 hours later Iroh's office. Okay. Let me get this straight here, you. Iroh said pointing at Naruto's cloaked form who was holding his Masumi on his lap, who at the moment was actually asleep at the moment. It had only been 2 hours since his arrival and already the clan was tremendously happy to see Naruto again. Even the shinobi tried to get to him and ask how he had been holding up since his departure from the clan. Kushina had none of that since she just wanted him to herself, and she did by pulling him away from them all leaving a dust trail in her wake. Right now he had been told of Naruto's actions during the time he was gone, and right now he was trying to grasp the fading reality that was true and what was not true. For the things his nephew had done was just so insane. Not only have you been training in isolation for the entire year, but also been coming in and out of hiding to not only kill off Iwa and Kumo's armies that have been nesting in our borders, but also been killing Konoha's own shinobi. Why in Kami's name did you do that? He said confused yet again for why his nephew did such a thing. Of course he knew of Naruto's hate for Konoha and their history of lies and betrayed agreements with them. Ever since Naruto read the treaty between them and Konoha and them trading over Mito in the past to the Shadaime as the balance for the treaty. Naruto's hate for them had been very strong, especially since the Shadaime not only had her chained down to him in marriage he had used Mito as a leverage to control the Uzumaki in some way. Hell he couldn't blame Naruto really since he too hated Konoha, but couldn't destroy the treaty since it was the only thing keeping them from total destruction. If it wasn't for that he would have destroyed that treaty long ago. Grinning Naruto spoke, you want the truth or just the lie that makes it more entertaining? Oh yes, there was also that. Naruto's attitude changed also, he was more of a joker now being as sarcastic as Kushina is sometimes. Sighing he waved his hand. The truth boy and don't leave anything out, which made Naruto's aloof posture quickly change to the same demeanor Iroh knew a year ago. There's the Naruto I remember. Well, it's because they've outright broke the treaty, they did it without the Uzumaki clan knowing, getting a shocked look from Iroh. How? What did they do? Worried yet bubbling anger started to build up within him. He too had an anger towards Konoha that was slowly growing each passing year. The reason? Trying to have him deliver his Masumi to them as a form of peaceful negotiations, but he knew the truth of what they would do. It would be the exact same thing the Shadaime did with Mito and he wouldn't let that shit happen again. Though when he looked at Naruto's face he saw him looking at Kushina, sleeping form with a solemn look. That's when the reason Naruto had been doing such things came crashing down on him. Don't tell me, they've actually been sending their armies here to threaten us to hand over Kushina, didn't they? He said, rubbing his temples in irritation. Naruto just nodded firmly with a hand running through Kushina's hair, making the girl sigh happily. Yes, that's right, plus given the fact they've been sending countless Anbu to try and track me down hasn't helped either. I don't know what they're planning, Iroh-sama, but it's gonna be big, he said with a serious look on his face. The man nodded before looking at Naruto with a calculative eye. Naruto, what do you think are our chances if indeed Konoha attacks? Which made Naruto close his eyes in thought. After a few minutes, he opened his eyes and spoke. Well, I'd say we could handle them, but it's the problem if they did attack Kumo and Iwa might take that chance to take us out. Let's not forget Suna's feelings toward us during the war, so they too might join the fight if it ever happens, which made Iroh frown. So many of their enemies would take the chance in helping against such an attack. Now if all these villages attack us all at once, we wouldn't survive such a force, getting a nod from Iroh. That is when the man gave a serious eye to Naruto, making the 10-year-old supernova eyes widen. Naruto, I want you to listen to me very carefully. If such a thing happens, I want you to get Kushina and flee from here. I won't risk having either one of you dying, with a look saying he wouldn't take a no for an answer. But I can still fight. If I were to use all my abilities to their fullest, then I could possibly pull out a win, trying to change Iroh's decision. Only to his fear, Iroh shook his head with a small sad smile. No, you've done so much for this clan, Naruto, that I've come close to making you the heir of the clan. Getting shocked look from Naruto, but he continued. But you and Kushina's lives are not only important to me, but the whole Uzumaki clan itself, and I won't have you two dying so early in your life. That's when all the retort Naruto could say died in his throat and replaced by acceptance. If you're sure about this, but there's still the chance this might not happen. He said, only to get a look from Iroh saying. I'm not stupid, Naruto. Naruto, you as well as I know it's gonna happen or will in the future, but now I have no doubt in my mind they will come, and especially if they find out you've returned, only for Naruto to drop his head in defeat. Single quote. Fine, he said, raising his head up to look at Iroh. I'll honor your words and do it just in case this happens, which made Iroh smile. Thank you, Naruto, but now would you do me a favor and release that henge when you get the chance? I wanna see the true you. Making Naruto blink in surprise before chuckling. Seems I can't keep anything from you, can I? Well, I can't really. Making Iroh blink in surprise. What do you mean you can't? It's just a henge, right? Nothing to worry about, right? With a suspicious look on Naruto, who at the moment just chuckled. Well, let's just say I'm stuck like this. It was a mistake on my part, for when I tried to apply my gravity seals a few months ago, it did something. From what I theorized, it held back my physical structure of growing any more. Well, that is until a few days later they will break. He uttered lowly at the end, but Iroh caught it. Okay, and what will happen once they do break? Only to get a hesitant look from him. Well, let's just say when they do, the area around myself will turn into a giant crater. Let's just say that he, only for Iroh to look at him curiously. And what, pray tell, do you have those gravity seals on? Which made Naruto try while failing to look away from Iroh. Well, last I checked it was 100x, he said so low that a mouse wouldn't pick it up, but the Uzumaki clan had heard him. Loud and clear, might I add. 100xxxx. Iroh stuttered with his mouth open in shock while his eyes could possibly fall out at any moment. 100x was said to be impossible for any human, since it would break their bones and crush their organs to dust. Though right here, in front of him, Naruto, the first ever Z-ranked shinobi in the bingo book, had those kind of seals on him and still moving. Of course, only Naruto would be able to do something like that. Shaking his head in exasperation, he asked one last question. Well, how about you tell me your training you went through over the last year? I'm curious, which was true. The things Naruto does to get stronger would put any shinobi, whether they be Kage or not, into deep exhaustion or downright a coma. Well, I've worked on my nature manipulation. Despite how good it was a year ago, I wanted it better, so I did a little experimenting and now gotten all three of my elements of Suiten, Raiden and Futon on levels I think is appropriate for now. My physical training has went great. From what you heard and seen in the bingo book, the ultimate test was with me fighting the Hachibi, he said, making Kyuubi within Kushina's seal perk up even more in attention as well as Iroh's. A test? The Hachibi was just a test to your physical strength, Iroh said with a disbelieving look on his face. Naruto just nodded. Yeah, that fight was pretty hard. Had to release all my seals to take the Biju down, but I won't say it wasn't fun. Fighting that Biju was so exhilarating, he said with childlike amusement. This boy fights a Biju, wins and finds it fun. Sweet Kami above. So the fight is true. So Naruto-kun exceeded even my own expectations. I wonder how he would fare against me, he. Why are you looking at me like that? He said, which Iroh just shook his head in silent amusement. No matter how strong Naruto was, he just kept getting stronger and stronger, so he just finally gave up trying to figure out the puzzle that was Naruto. Nothing. What else did you train in? He said, curious about other parts of Naruto's training. I mean, the man in front of him swatted armies of shinobi like flies and brought down a Biju with pure physical strength, so he was a tad bit curious. Well, I also worked on my speed. Because of my tall stature, I would need the speed to counterbalance my strength, and I did. Right now I've got multiple seals on my body that have been acting as weight for both my speed and chakra. Right now, if I was to take those seals off, I honestly don't know how much chakra I'd have, since I've never taken them off before except with the fight against the Hachibi. Though at that time I was only concentrated of getting out of that Amari attack, he said at the end. I see. And what else? Iroh said, trying really hard not to faint right there. Kyuubi wasn't any better. The female Biju was having a hard time seeing Naruto as a strong mortal and not a Biju in disguise. Well, the last thing I worked on was my Kenjutsu and fine-tuning it to perfection, yet I have not found a suitable weapon ever since the last weapon snapped in half. But I did find one ability of mine I discovered a while ago. It was similar to what I did a year ago, against the Tsuchikage and Raikage, he said, getting a surprised look from both Iroh and Kyuubi, who still wondered how Naruto was able to pull off such a feat. How? Was the one word Iroh said, and Naruto just rose up his left hand before a blue sphere appeared around it. It had some kind of static running around it. Iroh looked at Naruto with a questioning look and got his answer. I don't know much of this ability, Iroh. It may have come from my birth parents or maybe a hidden bloodline, but all I know is that this right here is the key to figuring out the rest of what I did that day. With that, the sphere disappeared like it wasn't even there, making Iroh and Kyuubi both confused at such an energy. Well, what did that sphere do? Which made Naruto look away sheepishly. Narrowing his eyes, he spoke. Naruto, what does that sphere do? Making Naruto sigh, closing his eyes. Do you remember the incident about 6 months ago? When the mountains of Tsuchi no Kuni were devastated? Getting a firm nod from Iroh. Yes, it was reported 3 whole mountains that signified the land being called the Land of Earth were totally destroyed. They never found out what happened, though it was said a sound of something breaking before the mountains were destroyed. That's right, and that was me. I was testing out that sphere with my physical strength added, and that was the results of me punching the mountain, he said, making Iroh gape before finally losing it. The man just fainted while Kyuubi was repeating the words Naruto just said over and over again, before a giant grin came up on her face as she looked at Naruto's form with a strange look in her crimson-slitted eyes. Oh yes, if you did, I wonder how much stronger you'll get. It's already seen Kushina will be your mate, but I do wonder, will you be worthy enough for a Biju, I wonder. Oi, Iroh. Wakey. Naruto said comically, slapping Iroh in face, trying to wake the man up, only to his failure he wasn't. Hanging his head low, Naruto looked at Kushina in his arms and smiled. Well, I can always talk to him later, because I think you need your sleep, Kushihime, he said before giving her a kiss on the cheek. He picked her up before shifting her form a bit till he had her in a bridal carry with her using his chest as pillow. With that he walked away to find her room and put her to bed. 1 week later with Naruto. It's been a week since Naruto's return to the Uzumaki clan and things have been normal and peaceful for the clan and Uzu no Kuni as a whole. The blonde had been spending his time mostly with Kushina since she had been very clingy to him. Though he didn't mind really since he had missed her greatly over the year he was gone. So yeah, he didn't really mind the fact they held hands walking side by side or the fact he held Kushina on his shoulders during the time he was back. Though he would hear rumors from his fellow clansmen of his relationship with Kushina, but he didn't deny them, neither did Kushina. They were too young for the more adult things, but that didn't mean they couldn't hug or hold each other. Though right now we could find Naruto at the moment cursing his luck, for now his peaceful return just got shot to hell. His return somehow was leaked from Uzu no Kuni by a spy from Kumo. The man was quickly killed by him, but the damage was done and all of the elemental nations knew he was back. And that meant chaos would follow. And it did. I can't believe this, Naruto shouted as the people around him were in a similar state, just not as vocal. Around him were the high officers of the Uzumaki army and their government. Many would think they would be snobbish, stuck-up the assholes, but no. They were quite the opposite, and Naruto was friends with each one of them since he himself had taken the rank of his father Ryu as the first commander of the Uzumaki army. Right now all of them had serious looks on their faces, as did Iroh. They just received reports of what Naruto predicted to come true. Iwa, Kumo and Suna joined forces and were heading their way to Uzu no Kuni so they could wipe them out for good. The one that reported was soon killed along with his squad from the invading force. Iroh closed his eyes in thought before speaking. Naruto, I told you when you came here that if this were to ever happen, do you remember what I told you to do? He said, making Naruto grit his teeth in anger yet the growing sadness of what Iroh was implying. Everyone else was already informed if this were to happen, and to the shock of Naruto agreed with Iroh. They just couldn't let them get him or Kushina. Damn it. I didn't want this to happen. God damn it, this place is my home. I can't leave it when it's gonna be destroyed. Only for Iroh to slap him across the head. Shut up, Baka. We know how important the clan is to you, but you have something more important to worry about. I've never told you, Naruto, but I will now. You and Kushina are what the Uzumaki clan symbolize. You both are what we will be leaving behind when we die, he said, making Naruto's eyes go wide before closing them to hide his emotion. You both will be our legacy to the world. I know how you feel about her as she feels about you. Even if you're not Uzumaki by blood, you're Uzumaki in everything else, Naruto, and I would be damn proud if you were the one Kushina lived with, since I know you would protect her with your life, he continued with a prideful smile on his face. The others just smiled as well. Naruto looked at them all before bowing his head in defeat. But, first Ryu, now the clan, he uttered, which they all heard and felt for him. The boy, their clan's pride was losing everything before him, first his adopted father and now soon his clan. Though they never did see the slight glimmer in Naruto's eyes, but they did hear his next few words. Very well, I'll be taking our leave right now, he said, but they felt the underlying message in his words and frowned. Naruto's gonna do something crazy again. Iroh looked at the back of his nephew with worry, but acceptance showing brightly in his eyes, knowing Naruto would do everything in his power to protect Kushina and give her the life she needs. Clan head compound -1 hour later. It had been an hour since Naruto left to prepare his and Kushina departure from Uzu no Kuni, but even now the burning anger for what was happening to his home burned within him. His hate and anger toward those that were invading grew even more. It was starting to make him tremble in anxiety to not just use everything in his power to wipe them all out. But then he would without a doubt destroy Uzu no Kuni as well. Having the storage scrolls sealed up with all of his belongings, Naruto walked into Kushina's room to see the little kunoichi in training studying her fuinjutsu. Looking up from the massive piles of scrolls, Kushina grinned. "Oh hey Naruto-kun, I'm just reading up on some late-night fuinjutsu study before I got to bed. Promise not to tell To-san, okay?" She said slowly at the end when she saw the serious look in Naruto's eyes. "Kushina-chan, we have to leave. I'll explain later, but right now it's important if we left right now," and the reaction he predicted came. Kushina's eyes widened before crawling out of the piles of fuinjutsu scrolls and ran up to him with a curious look on her face. "What are you talking about? What's wrong?" she said, worried of what Naruto was talking about. Sighing, Naruto shook his head. "I'm sorry, but I don't have time to explain, but all I can say is that by the order of Uzumaki Iroh, I am to escort you out of Uzu no Kuni and keep you safe from now on, as your eternal guardian," he said formally. Flashback 30 minutes earlier. "Naruto, by my order, I ask you to take Kushina away from here and to protect her with your life," he said, standing in front of his nephew in front of the Uzumaki clan compound, as the shinobi and protectors of the clan all rushed past them to the gates to prepare for the battle. They both didn't Kushina to hear the sounds, so Naruto placed a silencing seal on the compound so she wouldn't hear the noises from the outside. Looking at his adopted uncle, Naruto sighed while looking at the massing forces of the Uzumaki clan. "I don't have a choice. I accept, but is there anything you want me to give her, anything at all?" he said, looking at the armored Iroh, who was now prepared for the battle that will undoubtedly end in his death. Closing his eyes, Iroh formed a small sad smile on his face. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a scroll with the Uzumaki insignia and a small locket. The second item caught Naruto's attention, and looking at Iroh confirmed his suspicion. "You want me to give her this? I'm guessing you won't go see her again, will you?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Iroh just chuckled sadly and shook his head. "Nah, I can't. If I did, I'd probably have doubts about leaving her, but this is for the best," which made Naruto look away and close his eyes. Very well, it shall be done. I'll have her and leave in a few minutes." Naruto, thank you. Flashback end. Shaking his head of the recent thoughts, he looked down to see Kushina's confused yet worried face. Why is To-san ordering me to leave? Did I do something wrong?" she said, tears welling up in her eyes. Quickly he pulled her into a hug and spoke. "No. You've done nothing wrong. If anything, it's my fault that this is happening," he said quietly, but the redhead heard what he said perfectly and frowned in thought. "How is it Naruto-kun's fault?" I have a theory that Naruto's return has been leaked to the other countries by someone, and now the Uzumaki clan's enemies have reared their attention back onto the clan itself. But if that's true, then what's this got to do with what To-san is doing? Well, Kushi-chan, I am only running on a theory here, but from what I can see that something big is happening, and Iroh wants you and Naruto out of Uzu no Kuni as fast as possible. But the question is, what's going on? Kushina. Hearing her name, she shook her head to see Naruto looking at her with a stern yet saddened gaze. "I'm sorry, it's because of me that this is happening. No doubt Kyuubi-san has told you of what it thinks is going on, but right now we have to get moving." With that, he got a hesitant nod from her and started to seal all of her belongings. Her fuinjutsu scrolls, ninja tools, books and scrolls for Nin-ken-tai Genjutsu. After which he sealed up all of those scrolls into a secondary scroll and placed it into his vest pouch. Kushina watched all of this with her worry growing stronger with each passing second, since Naruto's face was showing signs of worry and anger. Something she rarely ever saw on his face before. Seeing everything safely sealed away, he turned to Kushina and crouched down with his back facing her. "Okay, Kushina-chan, get onto my back and hold on tight, for we will be going very fast," he said, not seeing the look of extreme worry on the Harem of the Uzumaki clan's face. Feeling the oncoming disturbance to the compound, he yelled, "Hurry, Kushina!" She quickly jumped onto his back, wrapping her arms around his neck while he held her legs firmly, and then with a mighty jump, He leapt out of the compound just in time before the compound itself to quickly explode in a fiery blaze of shrapnel and burning wood. Kushina snapped open her eyes to see her once upon a time compound and home destroyed, burning in what seemed like an explosion. That's when the sounds of fighting and screams of battle reached her ears. So scanning the area, all she saw from what she could see was the shinobi of her clan fighting shinobi of either Kumo, Iwa and Suna. All around from what she saw was fire and destruction left in the wake of the massive battle that was in front of her. That's when she spoke. What's going on here? I was right. Damn. What's happening, Q-chan? It would seem that my theory was correct. And Iwa, Kumo and even Suna have come to attack and completely annihilate the clan forever, and try and kill Naruto-kun here. Realization came into her eyes and looked worryingly at Naruto. Is that why father ordered for them both out of Uzu no Kuni? To get away from the invading force? Is that why Naruto blames himself for what is happening to their home? The baka. Naruto scowled at seeing all the destruction in front of him. The sky itself was pitch black in color from all the smoke of the fires rising into the sky. The scent of blood filled his nose and the sense of death all around him. The pain-filled screams of his fellow clansmen filled his ears, as well as those explosions of his home getting destroyed. Naruto-kun, look out, she said, making him snap his eyes open only to curse loudly. Single quote, exclamation mark, single quote. Before jumping over a Doden jutsu aimed right at him, that's when he heard the crunching of multiple footsteps, and from the gasp filled full of terror from Kushina he knew it had to be bad. Well, Luki here, it's him, a voice dripping with venom and arrogance. Naruto scowled at what was in front of him while Kushina on his back wrapped her arms even tighter at what she was seeing, while Kyuubi inside the seal growled in anger. For in front of the three was two brigades, one for Iwa and the other for Kumo, and at their respective leads was one masked men for both brigades with a kanji for Anbu commander in front of them. Naruto looked over the countless enemies upon countless enemies of both Iwa and Kumo and growled. I see now. Iwa and Kumo used Suna as bait to draw me out and have both Iwa and Kumo divert their whole attention on me, bastards, he uttered, which Kushina heard but was too terrified to speak. Ha ha ha. You're completely outnumbered this time, you monster. Even if you have the power to wipe out armies this time, you've got the whole forces of both Iwa and Kumo right in front of you, with both the Raikage and Tsuchikage not too far away. There's no hope for you this time, said the tiger-masked Anbu leading the Iwa brigade. Seeing the inevitable battle, Naruto looked over his shoulder at Kushina with a solemn look before the sounds of her sniffles and muffled crying reached his ears. With that, the dwindling flames blazed up once again while something around him just expelled, making the whole area somehow start to shake. Kushina-chan, whatever you do, don't let go of me, this will be one hell of a ride, which made her nod while wrapping her legs around his waist as tight as she could. With that, he looked up at the arrogant looks from all the enemy shinobi in front of him and spoke, now. I'll show you why I'm so feared. He yelled before raising his right hand, which was circled by a blue sphere of some sort. Then with a mighty swing he punched, the air itself making a slight tremor erupt and the sound of glass breaking echo around the area. A moment of silence followed. Ha! What was THAAAAAATTTT? He never got to finish before a massive shockwave erupted from where the punch came from. The shockwave crashed into the shinobi forces like a god smiting its prey with a swipe of his hand. Some of the shinobi had the luck of getting out of the way of the attack, but, to the horror of many and the silent look of awe from Kushina and Kyuubi, the once massive army of the two brigades of Iwa and Kumo's finest was left with nothing more than 2/3 of their forces, with them all left in disarray. A massive trench was in front of Naruto, with it going on for about 30 miles, with it being 10 miles in width, but the blast radius was much different. It was showing immeasurable size, with all that was in front of that one punch nothing but devastation in its path. Trees uprooted, the ground turned to dust, and half a mountain clearly destroyed. Among the trench was crushed or pulverized shinobi looking like nothing from what they used to be, but only that of a bloody sacks of flesh on death's door. Kushina and Kyuubi, looked at the sight of power in total awe or mostly to Kyuubi's shock. Breathing out, Naruto glared among the last of the forces that survived his attack. He couldn't do that again or risk him actually sinking the island itself. Hell, right now, he had a hard time keeping that attack under control. So when he gazed upon the last remnants of the 2 brigades, he counted the numbers to be past 500. Monster. He's a monster, murmured a terrified Iwa shinobi. He had just seen his allies all ready to take down Iwa and Kumo's most hated enemy and bring glory to their village. Only in that second the man let loose one punch and all of his allies, those thousands upon thousands of his allies, were all destroyed or blown away. In that one moment he looked at Naruto's body with eyes that were now filled with terror. Even their Anbu commander was completely decimated from the attack, and it was rumored they were as strong as their cages. What was to say this being before him didn't just have the power to swat cages like children. For after seeing this, reality was just shattered from him. He looked around to see a few of both forces survived and gathering up for an attack. Despite the overwhelming fear and his instincts yelling at him to run away, he gathered with them, thinking they just caught them off guard. Yet, even in the deepest reaches of his soul, he knew that they weren't gonna survive. Seeing them all gather up made Naruto scowl even more in irritation. Gripping his fist, he did a few hand seals before he heard the collective shouts from the shinobi before him. Doden. Doryuden. Earth Release. Earth Dragon Bullet was the shout of 200 of Iwa shinobi. Raiden. Raryuden. Lightning Release. Lightning Dragon was the shout of 250 Kumo shinobi. Kushina watched an incoming army of elemental dragons coming toward her with horror. She wasn't used to something like, and it was overwhelming her every second. Naruto somehow felt what she was feeling and spoke. Don't worry, Kushi-chan, I promised your father I would protect you, and I will with my dying breath, he said, not caring if the dragons were but 5 feet away from him. He looked over his shoulder and spoke with a small smile. Besides, I gotta protect my fiancé, shouldn't I? He said teasingly, and before she could even retort, Naruto swiftly brought his left hand up, and with but a swing, a blade of concentrated futon chakra came out, being the width of 50 feet. It clashed against the dragon, then a sudden explosion erupted, making the ground shake and smoke go into the air, making a small mushroom cloud hang over the small battlefield. That's when his senses kicked in. Surprising Kushina, Naruto spun around quickly, only to receive a slash across his chest from a katana-wielding Iwa nin. Letting out a small grunt, Naruto took a step back and looked down to see a gash from the katana, showing it was charged with futon chakra, making it hurt all the more. Ignoring the bleeding, Naruto focused his murderous gaze upon the smug-looking Iwa nin. Ha! I injured the so-called nightmare of Iwa. This guy is pathetic, he said arrogantly, while his comrades were letting out small smug smiles as well, knowing they were catching the man off guard now and knew the mon's weakness. It was the little girl on his back. Though the man that injured Naruto didn't know how bad he up. Kushina looked at Naruto's wound with horror-filled eyes. The wound showed the blood practically pouring out of him. She clenched her eyes closed, knowing it was her fault Naruto was hurt. She was just being a weakness right now. Naruto felt Kushina's distress and frowned. She's crying. Does she think it's her fault? Glaring, Naruto raising his hand and grasped the shinobi by the head, and to the shock of many lifted the squirming man into the air, his feet dangling helplessly in the air. Kushina watched with terror-filled eyes as Naruto grit his teeth in anger, before clenching his fist tight, making the squirming shinobi scream loud. Ah! Let go of me! He yelled, feeling the unbearable pressure of his skull being physically caved in, squishing his brain and cracking his skull. Naruto ignored him and spoke, his voice echoing all across the battlefield. You bastards made the wrong move, in attacking my home just for the sake of finding me. You wanted a war, you'll get a war, he said, making many weak-willed suddenly pass out, scaring the shit out of few other shinobi. Especially the look in Naruto's eyes showed he wouldn't spare anyone. Kushina, close your eyes, don't peek. Kyuubi, turn off her hearing, she doesn't need to hear this, he said, knowing Kyuubi was seeing this and knew Naruto was right. Kushina would be petrified at what was about to happen. With that, Kushina closed her eyes tightly while Kyuubi turned off the hearing of her container, but did keep a mental window of the soon-to-be battle. I wanna see how much blood you will spill for your loved ones. Show me, Naru-kun, show me you're worthy. With Naruto turned his icy blue eyes upon the numerous shinobi and roared. Now you bastards will pay, all of you. With Naruto crushed the skull of the Iwa nin, showering him in blood and gore as brain matter splashed his face. The rest of the Iwa nin's dead body fell onto the ground, but it was suddenly sent rocketing by a kick from Naruto, sending it crashing into a Kumo nin, which quickly killed the Kumo shinobi due to the velocity the body hit him at, which shattered his spine completely. This scared many of the shinobi. Seeing such a display appear before them, it made many retch at such a sight, while others tried to keep control of their bladders. That's when they felt a deadly presence overcome them all. So looking at Naruto's form, they all saw him glaring at them all with his stone-cold murderous sapphire eyes with the flecks of golden amber glowing brightly. This scared them even more. It got worse when a ghostly figure appeared over Naruto, with it showing to be the apparition of a demonic-looking figure holding a scythe in its hand. Your price for angering me is death. With that, the slaughter began. Watching this slaughter was none other than the Raikage and Tsuchikage. Both had witnessed the battle from start, and now they both were now standing shocked still as they saw all their shinobi practically ripped, torn, shredded and outright dismembered. They watched as their most hated enemy slaughtered every single shinobi before him. They watched as the man no monster get cut up, slashed by katanas, stabbed by kunais or hit by dodenjutsus. The man just brushed them off, ignoring his massive injuries, and kept his pace of killing them all with their blood showering the ground and himself. I think I just shit myself, murmured the Raikage, which was indeed true, for the brown stain in his pants and the foul odor coming from him. Onoki felt the same way, since the man was on the ground back away at what he was seeing. In just a year, that monster grew strong enough to wipe out his best shinobi like they were children. Right now, Onoki truly felt the meaning of fear. I think it's best we retreat and head back to continue our attack upon Uzu no Kuni. We might not be able to kill him, but at least we can kill and destroy his clan. Onoki said, determined to at least wound his most hated enemy by destroying his home. With that, the two cages left with their prides shattered and their fears for the man raised up to new heights. Kyuubi right now having a hard time from holding back a moan of pleasure as she saw her container's mate practically slaughter all the shinobi before him like pigs. The blood and gore coated him like a blanket. It drenched him, but it suited him quite nicely in her opinion. The way he tore some of them apart was breathtaking to her. The way he killed them, the way he showed no mercy as he crushed a pleading shinobi by the head with his boot or rammed his entire fist through one mon's head. It was glorious. She knew now without a doubt, Naruto was worthy, no scratch, that he was probably the only being alive that could subdue her if he was to go berserk like he's done. Though when he looked up her container, her eyes softened. The little girl was shaking like a leaf from all the sudden movements Naruto made. It was a good thing she covered Kushina in her chakra cloak, or she too would have coated in the blood. That would have scarred the little girl for life. Though when she looked at Naruto's bloody form, his wounds only making him all the more wanting from her. She felt a shiver of excitement go down her spine. She idly wondered if Naruto was part of some demon for him to fight like he did. Naru-kun. I cannot wait our meeting, for it is sure to be exciting. Naruto, on the outside, exhaled as the bloodlust look in his eyes disappeared. He looked around himself to see the multiple bodies of his enemies strewn about, dead in the most painful ways possible, or some close to dying, just slowly bleeding to death. He looked at himself and grimaced. Kushina would have a fit if she saw him like this, and the opponent's injuries wouldn't help either. So with a quick jump, Naruto jumped into the air and into the forest while using a small sweetened jutsu to wash off the gore and blood on his body. After the quick clean-up, he made sure the smell of blood was off of him and his belongings before looking over his shoulder to see the chakra-cloaked form of Kushina still with her eyes closed and here silenced. Though when he saw her shaking like a leaf form he grimaced before speaking. Alright Kyubi, bring the hearing back into her ears, we're safe for the moment. And Kyubi did as told, the hearing came back to Kushina. So when she heard no fighting, only the sounds of crickets and the sound of water, she snapped open her eyes to see that she was now in a forest. Looking around she saw that she was still holding onto Naruto, and that's also when she saw the worried blue orbs of Naruto staring at her. You okay, Kushi-chan? He said, only for her to give her immediate response. Naruto-kun, you're okay. She said, not seeing his injuries even now since they were covered up a bit by Naruto, since she didn't want her to worry. The redhead glomped him as best as she could, her little arms small compared to Naruto's form. Sensing this, he let her hug him tightly as she rubbed her cheek against his. As much as I love you hugging me like this, we gotta get moving, Kushi-chan, unless you wanna stay like this, he said teasingly, making the redhead blush in embarrassment. Sorry, but let's go, she proclaimed. Chuckling, Naruto nodded. Very well then, just hold on tight, and she did. To her eagerness, she gripped Naruto's head tightly. Naruto charged chakra into his legs, adding it with his physical strength. He jumped over the sea itself. Seeing the incoming land after crossing the sea at such fast speeds, Naruto prepped for landing. He gripped the laughing Kushina firmly as the landing quickly came into sight. Boom! With small explosion, Naruto landed right in the middle of another forest, but he was familiar with. They were the forests of Nami no Kuni. He looked to see Kushina grinning widely with her big violet orbs glittering with excitement. WOWE. That was fun. LTS, do that again, DATTEBANE. She exclaimed, pumping her fist into the air. Naruto just chuckled at her enthusiasm at what he just did, only she would want to do something like that again and or find it fun. While others just found it terrifying or destroyed all logic of what they knew to be impossible. That's when his mission came to mind and the cold hard realization came down upon Naruto. Turning around slightly, Naruto saw the smoking form of Uzu no Kuni and let a small tear go down his face. I'll protect her forever, Iro-sama. Not just by your order, but since Kushina is my most precious person. He mentally thought as he gazed at the excited chatterbox that was his best friend girlfriend. Patting her on the head gently, he gave her a small kiss on the cheek, earning a small blush from her, and spoke, "Let's go, Kushi-chan, we're burning night time and I promise to have you away from these borders soon." With a slow nod from the blushing girl, Naruto ran at fast speeds most couldn't catch past the forests and deeper into territory of other countries. One day later, Hai no Kuni borders. It's been a day since the two have traveled. First, after leaving Uzu no Kuni, they passed Nami no Kuni and crossed the borders of Kaminari no Kuni. Now they were passing through Hai no Kuni borders, the very country not only he, but Kushina hated with a passion. It wasn't the country they hated though, it was Konoha that nested within the country. She'd started to hate them early on in her studies of being a shinobi. As the day of traveling passed, night time had fallen and Kushina was starting to notice Naruto's tried form. He was sweating a lot and his clothes were starting to get more wet. From what she didn't know, and that worried her. Laying down a small tent, Naruto was laying down in his futon trying to block out the pain from his wounds. He hadn't had the time to heal yet. That's when he heard the entrance to his tent flap open slightly, so when he looked up slightly he saw the worried face of Kushina. "Naruto-kun, can I sleep with you? I'm scared," she said, not seeing his state of weakness. Naruto, seeing her state, fought down his one and ushered her in. She followed in and snuggled into him as he wrapped them both in a blanket. He felt her snuggle closer into his chest, while her long maroon hair covered her small frame compared to his own. He shakily wrapped her up in a hug which she quickly embraced while letting out a sigh of contempt. Now, despite his numerous injuries, he let out a small smile before kissing Kushina on the forehead before pulling her closer into him. "I love you always, Kushi-hime, forever and beyond, even in death." Though what he didn't see was the small yet happy smile slowly appear on Kushina's face before she snuggled her face into his chest while the happy tears flooded out of her eyes. "He loves me. He loves me. He loves me, she repeated in her mind, finalizing those words forever in her mind as well as them both in each other's embrace. That's when their moment was suddenly destroyed when Naruto's senses went haywire. Biting back the pain, Naruto grabbed Kushina and jumped out of the tent just in time from a hail of kunai to stab through the tent and into the pillow of where Naruto's head used to be. Naruto's sense of alert and danger was going out of control, but as he hid Kushina behind him, he looked around to see the moving shadows of what he already knew was shinobi. Yet he couldn't tell who they were. That is until he heard a voice. A voice he knew all too well. Kukuku, seems we meet again, Naruto, a snake-like voice echoed from the forests. Snapping his attention to the voice, Naruto hid Kushina behind him protectively and spoke, "You, if you're here, then that means." "That's right, Gaki," said a voice similar to that of male but also to that of Lecher. "It's been a long time since we've seen each other, brat," a female voice followed with a hint of bitterness in her tone. Gritting his teeth in anger, "I see, so he's sent you three after me." The old buzzard probably knew of the attack and saw that as a chance to take me out, Naruto said, confusing Kushina while some of the shadows in the forest tensed. "Don't you dare insult sensei," the Lecher-like voice yelled, making Naruto just grin. "Why not just come out already, or are you three and your little friends too scared? Is that it, Jiraiya, Tsunade, Orochimaru?" he said, speaking their three names, making Kushina's eyes go wide in recognition. "Hehe, it seems you haven't lost your touch with your sensing abilities, Naruto." Single quote. Orochimaru said, coming out of the shadows with a smile that just defined that of a snake ready to get its prey. Orochimaru was a pale man, pale as death, and had snake-like yellow slitted eyes. His long black hair went past his shoulder blades. He wore a black long-sleeved shirt with a green Junin vest symbolizing him for Konoha. Around his left bicep was a Konoha headband. He wore black shinobi pants ending at the calf. His calves were wrapped in medical tape. Lastly was his black shinobi sandals and his pouch on his right leg. "I agree, but then again this Gaki isn't normal," Jiraiya said with a firm look in his eyes as they gazed at the one person Konoha hated more than Iwa and Kumo combined. The man had long white spiky hair with two red line marks going down his face. He had black eyes and tan skin. He wore the same thing Orochimaru was, except his long-sleeved shirt was blue and so were his pants. He had a pouch on his left leg. "Meh, still can't believe this brat is the same one that has sensei all worked up," Tsunade said with a hint of disbelief in her voice. The woman was dressed the exact same way as Jiraiya, only her long pale blonde hair passed her shoulders while they were both tied in two ponytails. Her brown eyes glittered with anger yet irritation. She also had fair skin that which shone greatly in night. These three were the students of Hiruzen Sarutobi, shinobi of Konoha, the Densetsu no Sannin, legendary three ninja, newly named by Hanzo the Salamander himself. They all had many differences, but one thing they all shared was one thing. And that was their rivalry with Naruto himself. It was a secret that no one knew, but that Naruto during the war was able to beat them all three into submission, and ever since they have always trained and trained to just take out Naruto before word was ever spread them three were taken out. By a child no less. "Bring out your little friends, you three, for I am in no mood for games," Naruto said with a look in his eyes that could scare an army of cages. Jiraiya flinched a bit from the look in Naruto's eyes, as did Tsunade. Orochimaru hid it very well, but he too was unnerved a bit by those eyes. "Very well then, Gaki, it's your funeral," Jiraiya said, snapping his fingers, with the whole forest was swarmed with shinobi. Looking around himself, Naruto saw that the many shinobi he saw were all of Konoha's very own, with some being their Anbu. Growling, he looked down at Kushina briefly to see her shaking form and spoke. "What do you want with me?" He spoke so quietly that those with even trained senses would need to strain their ears greatly to hear his words, but they heard him, which Orochimaru just smiled sinisterly. Raising his finger, the pale man spoke for his teammates and pointed at Kushina's quivering form. "We are here for her, Naruto-kun," he said, making Naruto's eyes go wide while Kushina looked on terrified at what she just heard. Clenching his fist, Naruto spoke gravely, "And what, pray tell, do you want with her?" he said, gritting his teeth while randomly letting out a spike of killer intent, making a few shinobi tense. Orochimaru just grinned darkly and said, "Why, for one, she's the last of her clan and also the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. So sensei took this as his chance to get her since it was such a great time, but we never calculated for you to be with her," he said sarcastically at the end. Naruto's eyes gained a dangerous look to them, adding already to his fearful eyes. He clenched his fist so hard he drew blood and his knuckles popped. Looking down at Kushina, he saw her terrified violet eyes, and then he flinched when he felt his wounds acting up. That's also when he felt the disturbance in his chakra. His eyes mentally widened when he felt the gravity seals acting up. Damn, not now. Gritting his teeth, Naruto crouched down and spoke, "Kushihime, get on my back, and whatever you do, don't let go," he said while she just nodded, fearful of what was to come. Getting onto his back once more, Naruto started to slowly release his remaining chakra and spoke in such a voice that it made many lose control of their bladders, or in the Senin's case take a few steps back. "You want her? You're gonna have to go through me," he said, and with that Naruto charged at the Senin, the shinobi of Konoha falling behind him charging at his back. The Senin prepared themselves as the speeding rocket of Naruto's form coming at them with murder in his eyes. With that, the battle of not only survival began, but also the battle to protect what was precious to Naruto began. 1 hour later, the Great Ravine. The forests of Hai no Kuni, the once tall trees that stood against all, were now devastated or outright destroyed. It had only been an hour since the battle between Naruto and Konoha's strike force of Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Orochimaru and their shinobi. And he was faring pretty well. That is until actually saw the many numbers Sarutobi sent after him. It was well over twice the size of both Iwa and Kumo's forces he fought early combined. It didn't help much that he was also fighting the Senin as well, and in his weakened state it only made it all the harder for him. At their Great Ravine, the historical land that was where the Shadaime faced off against one of the Biju in the early years, was the battered and bleeding forms of the three Senin. All three of them were greatly wounded from their battle with the wounded yet titanic Naruto. Their forces were, but destroyed or out of commission from Naruto's attacks. They only had a handful of shinobi left, and even then that was a small number compared to how many Naruto has killed. The Z-ranked shinobi himself wasn't looking good either. His wounds from fighting Iwa and Kumo were now fully opened back up, added with the freshly made wounds from his fight with Konoha's forces. His form had multiple burns, cuts, slashes and gashes of all kinds. His clothes were ruined by getting hit by dozens of Kaden jutsus. His back was riddled with Senbon, kunai and shuriken with the occasional katana or two. His face had blood going down over his eyes and blood coming out of his mouth, but his eyes were the most terrifying thing of all. They had the look of pure defiance even with his mortal injuries. His icy blue sapphire eyes glared darkly at the remaining Konoha forces and the three injured Senin. His eyes showed even in his weakened state he wouldn't go down without a fight. Right now he was on the ground, knee first, with a worried to death Kushina crying seeing his bloody form. She climbed off only to see a Konoha nin take that as a chance to get her. Too bad for him that Naruto was still fighting, and with a quick turn, Naruto grabbed the shinobi by the neck and slammed him right into the ground, creating a small crater with the pulverized shinobi clearly dead. "Kami, this kid is a monster," Jiraiya said, holding his bleeding chest in pain. He got a nod from both his teammates. Even with the kid weakened, he was still a god among fighting, and his will to not die was amazing to say the least. "I agree, but even he is reaching his limit," Orochimaru stated with blood coming out of his mouth. Tsunade only nodded, too exhausted to speak and concentrating to heal the wounds she has and the low level of chakra she has right now. "One more strike and take the little girl and push him off the cliff, that should finish this," Orochimaru said, with his teammates agreeing fully. "With Naruto we could find him at the edge of the ravine with Kushina in front of him trying to everything she could to heal him. only to fail with his bleeding blocking out her limited knowledge of healing. Tearing up, Kushina looked up to see the coughing up blood of her best friend, but right now he was just smiling warmly at her. Despite her failures of trying to heal him, he was grateful for her to try. Kushi-chan, come here, he said, which she did, slowly walking into his awaiting arms and hugged his bleeding body with tears flowing freely down her face. Naruto wrapped his right arm around her small frame and spoke even as the light in his eyes was dimming. He could feel the life in him dimming no matter how much he wanted to deny it. He was gonna die here, and to lose Kushina to Konoha was tearing him apart. But damn it, he would keep fighting. He would fight for just a miracle to happen. So he can help Kushina. Kushi-chan, look at me, he uttered, which she did ever so slowly despite the now incoming 3 Sennin and the forces of Konoha charging at Naruto's down form. Looking down, Naruto saw her violet-red puffy eyes looking at him with worry for him, which filled his heart with warmth. Placing a shaky hand on her cheek, he looked her in the eyes and spoke. Kushi-chan, never forget. I love you with all my heart, soul and my being. Even if we are separated, I'll come for you, just remember, and never forget. I love you, Uzumaki Kushina. With that, Naruto gave one more kiss to Kushina, kissing her on the lips, shocking her greatly since this wasn't just an accidental kiss but his intentional kiss. She felt all the love he had for her, the passion he had for her that has been with him for years since he's been with her. It brought tears to her eyes before she leaned into the kiss with him, enjoying his lips with hers. Naruto opened his eyes slightly, letting a small tear fall. Seeing the charging forces of Konoha, he could already feel his gravity seals acting abnormally, telling him they were about to explode, and he didn't know what would happen. And he would rather die than have Kushina killed by his own hands from the seals upon his body. Seeing the incoming shinobi, he separated from Kushina, slightly breaking the kiss, closed his eyes and let his last few words come out of his mouth. I will see you again, Kushina-chan. Don't forget me, is all I ask of you. And with that, Naruto closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against Kushina's own, sealing his words with a last gentle kiss to her lips. Naruto and Kushina were separated from each other as Tsunade grabbed Kushina and knocked her out from when she tried to struggle from her grasp. While her other 2 teammates along with the rest of Konoha's shinobi all struck at once where Naruto's bleeding body was. But the last few words he spoke before the explosion happened scared them all till their very souls trembled in absolute fear. The look in Naruto's just told them. They royally just screwed the up. You Konoha bastards might have won this day, but rest assured. I'll be back, and next time, he said as the ninjutsu and explosive noted kunai all struck where he was. I'll kill all of you. He yelled as all the attacks collided with each other. Boom. In a fiery blaze of destruction, the end of the cliff exploded in a red giant fireball of Kaiden jutsu and explosive kunais. The cliff totally destroyed. The Konoha nin all looked to see the once most hated enemy of Iwa, Kumo, and Konoha's body gone. His body must have been vaporized from such a combined attack. Orochimaru theorized as Jiraiya walked over to Tsunade with Kushina's unconscious form on the ground, with he himself having a grim look on his face. To think, even in his weakened state, that guy did all that damage to us to just protect this girl, he said, looking at Kushina's form with curiosity. I know, he fought like he was a man possessed. It was actually pretty scary when you think about if he were to ever have grown stronger. Tsunade said with a grim yet shaken look in her eyes. Jiraiya nodded. That was true. It was a good thing they had Naruto at his weakest, since he was not only still injured after fighting Iwa and Kumo, but also he took the hits aimed for Kushina made him weaker. He would admit it though, if they hadn't used those kind of tricks he had no doubt they would have all died, no questions asked. Still, it brought a shiver of fear up his spine when he saw that last look in Naruto's eyes and his parting words before the explosion. Looking at Kushina, he narrowed his eyes and brought out a bottle of ink and a brush, which Tsunade quickly knew what he was gonna do. It's time to finish the last part of the mission. Tsunade place her on her stomach. Once she did, Jiraiya did a few strokes quickly on the girl's neck, showing a strange seal. Next he did a few hand seals and spoke. Fuinjutsu. Memory Roku, Fuin. Fuinjutsu. Memory lock. Seal. With that the seal glowed a bright blue before disappearing along with the seal. With a nod of seeing the seal not visible, Jiraiya picked up Kushina's body and started walking back to Konoha, his teammates in tow along with their forces. Just that, Jiraiya never knew that the seal he placed on Kushina, he made a mistake on, which will cause him dearly in the future. Kyuubi within her container screamed in outrage as the seal placed upon her container did its work in locking up her memories of Naruto and her family. It was getting closer to her as well, and with her power sealed away she couldn't do much to stop it. I swear to Kami, Kushi-chan. Naru-kun will be back and will save us. I only hope it's soon. With the memory of Naruto vanished completely from Kyuubi as well, locked away by the seal Jiraiya placed upon Kushina. Konoha made a mistake though on that day, for kidnapping the very person Naruto loved the most has started a chain reaction that would change the world forever. Inside the ravine ground, on the ground of the deep ravine of Hai no Kuni, was a large crater with rubble of rock around the crater. Inside the crater though was the bloody form of Naruto. Only this time he was covered head to toe in glowing seals. His blonde hair was matted down with blood and his face was pale. His body started to glow rapidly with the seals in the color of a deep yellow with a tint of black. Once the first seal cracked, it started a chain reaction of the others following and, with a last pulse of chakra. Boom! An explosion of chakra along with yellow-blackish energy erupted in the ravine as the energy of the release was about to reach past the ravine and alert many. It stopped suddenly and quickly followed right back, converging right into Naruto's yellow glowing body. His whole form was seeable, but his appearance was unseen by any. Though that quickly changed when the yellow energy gradually started to fuse into his body. As it did so, it revealed a different Naruto. The once tan skin he had was now a porcelain that glowed brightly in the dark ravine. His height from his original 5 feet 5 was not a whopping 6 feet 4. His whole body was twice the size it was before and his muscles were 3 times the size they were before. His face was now a lot more angular and masculine. Some would think this man was in his early 20s. His hair was still golden blonde with a few black highlights within, with his hair being longer than it was before and much more tamed, but spikes still jutted out. That's when the slight twitch of movement from his hand signified Naruto was alive. When his eyes opened up slightly, it showed the color of something that would strike fear into many. His eyes were the color of a golden amber with a much more gold tint to it, and his pupils having a slit pupils of a predator. Silently looking over his body, the now giant of a teen spoke. Now, this isn't what I expected, he said before balling up his fist and slamming it against the ravine wall. Surprisingly, a feel of some kind of energy flowed through his attack, made the wall fall completely apart. Thus, made the newly changed Naruto blink in surprise before a grin came upon his face. Don't worry Kushi-chan, soon. I'll come back for you, and this time, we'll be together and nothing shall separate us again. He yelled as an unnatural wind blew out from him, pulverizing the spiked and jagged walls of the great ravine. The ground itself trembled beneath his feet while the animals of the forest near the ravine all ran fearfully from the terrifying power coming from the ravine. Be warned Konoha, your time is coming, said a flaming Naruto as yellow-blackish flames flamed from him. Deep within the ravine, Naruto looked himself over and saw the tremendous changes that overgone his body. He flexed his arm outward and back. He looked to see his stature was now much bigger than it was before, taller than he expected to be. Looking at his hair, he saw the black highlights in them making him quirk an eyebrow, but he did feel the hair, it felt more like a lion's mane. That's when he felt the immense power flowing through and around him. It was like a maelstrom of power flowing in him, ready to burst out at any moment. Looking at the obliterated wall made him think. Well, this is an unexpected change, but that's not important right now. First off, Konoha took Kushina-chan, that's one reason to destroy them all, but the way I am right now, one mistake could kill and destroy so many. That's when he pulled out a locket Iroh gave him before he escaped with Kushina. He knew it all too well, Flipping it open, he smiled warmly, seeing himself with Kushina in a picture on the right side, smiling with her in his arms. Stroking the picture gently, Naruto frowned. I've got to train these powers and master them, cause if I don't, who knows what would happen if I made the slightest mistake. But what of Kushina? No, they won't hurt her. She's too precious to them. Bastards will get theirs. He closed the locket, not looking at the other picture, for it was for Kushina's eyes only. Besides, he knew what was on the other side. Looking around himself, he saw most of his belongings either trashed by the fall or destroyed by the explosion. Looking into his vest, he saw the scroll Iroh gave him, along with the one he sealed up his and Kushina's own books and scrolls. Placing them back inside the vest pocket, Naruto looked up to see the night sky. He wondered how long he had been down here, but shook his head, not really caring, only to get his powers mastered and get Kushina back. Time to start training. The sooner I have them mastered, the sooner I can get Kushi-chan back. With that, Naruto started unsealing many camping supplies, marking the once site where he was supposedly killed, his new home for the next few years. Konoha would never know that their number one enemy was still alive and practically under their noses. Konohagakure Hokage office. It's been 3 days since Sarutobi sent out his students along with most of his forces to secure Uzumaki Kushina and to kill Uzumaki D. Naruto. Since then, Hiruzen has been very jumpy lately. He believed truly he did his students killed Naruto, the very man that scared even him. But, even still, he had a feeling that something was wrong, something out of place. Looking over at his couch, he saw the still unconscious form of Uzumaki Kushina, last remaining Uzumaki and container of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. He heard of how the Z-ranked shinobi fought to protect Kushina. The reports all shocked him to his very core. The man fought like he was possessed, nothing could take him down. Jutsu, weapons, taijutsu, genjutsu, nothing. Even Jiraiya summoned thingamabob did nothing, if only angered Naruto further. He was speechless when Jiraiya told him of how he practically manhandled Gamabunta. He heard of how he took Gamabunta's own weapon and swung it back, making a scar over the giant toad's left eye. He looked over at Kushina and spoke so quietly, "Why would that man fight so hard to protect you? I wonder, was it something concerning you, or was it out of his own personal feelings?" He mused outwardly, wanting no needing to know why a man of such power and fame would protect someone like her. Was it that he was an Uzumaki as well? Was that he was sent to protect her? It frustrated him greatly of why the man fought to protect her so greatly. Shaking his head, he looked back to his desk to read the reports from his spies all across the elemental nations. It was all reported that Konoha was the one to finally kill the legendary man himself. They had sent out a force bigger and stronger than both Iwa and Kumo's combined to kill the man. Well, that was what they told the public, but in reality it was a mission to capture Kushina. True, Konoha suddenly got many enemies from the countries that saw the man as a hero but weren't brave enough to start a fight with them. But they did receive the title, strongest shinobi village in the whole elemental nations, since they were the ones to kill a man capable of beating a Biju. Yes, they used underhanded tactics, but he's dead and gone, never to bother them and scare him again. Right. As Hiruzen was looking at the reports in thought, he never saw the glowing of Jiraiya's seal upon Kushina's neck crack halfway through before disappearing once more. 10 years later. It has been 10 years since the death of Uzumaki D. Naruto, number one most hated shinobi of Iwa, Kumo and Konoha. Ever since then, Konoha took pride in its title of being the strongest and proved it time and time again in the war. Ever since Naruto's death, it put quite a halt on the war all around, since it was such shock to many. Though over the years Konoha has let their fame go to their heads and made many arrogant, thinking they were invincible after killing a god-like being those years ago. With only a select few within knowing how false all that was, knowing the man could have easily destroyed them. But a few things has happened after all these years. Strange events have been popping up with a few countries, including AIM and Kiri. The rumored complete and utter defeat of Hanzo the Salamander, and the civil war starting all over again, this time with a new Kage following in the few steps of his predecessor. Strangely enough though, Kumo's hatred over Naruto began to dwindle over time since his death. It would seem Naruto finally gained a very high respect of the Raikage after his accomplishments against Konoha. Despite being mortal enemies, the Raikage held a great respect for the man for the things he done against Konoha. The ravine itself, the place where Naruto was killed, was soon upon by many votes by many countries and feudal lords that were great friends to Naruto marked it as his tombstone, for being the only true place a being like Naruto should be buried. What better place to honor a man that beat a Biju than to mark the place of his death, than the great scar made from a Biju's attack? But with one appearance, will shock the very nations themselves. Forest of High no Kuni road to Konohagakure. Walking on the dirt road to Konohagakure, was a cloaked man. He stood at any normal human height of 5 feet 8 or so. The cloak covered up the whole of the man's body. The way the man moved though told a different story from him looking totally normal in height. He moved like a fighter, an experienced soldier ready for the quickest ambush of any kind. This would unnerve many people, but it's usually common in the land of shinobi, so some just pass it off being it normal. The thing was though that this man wasn't normal by any means. Raising his head a bit, you could see the blackness of the cloak shadowing the man's face, but that's when his eyes. The eyes would make any person, whether they be civilian, shinobi, Kage or even Biju, feel like nothing but an ant facing a giant tsunami. The overwhelming look in the man's golden amber slitted eyes just told you he wasn't normal. It practically screamed danger and would make any lesser man die of pure fear. With each step he took, the wind would blow past him, ruffling his cloak and making the trees rustle in the wind. Each time his eyes looked at the closing distance of Konoha, a great black hot hate would glow brightly in his eyes, making even the skies themselves part way. Each time his body seemed to pulsate in a strange wind, the ground would gradually crack or the trees themselves would start to uproot. I'm coming, Kushi-chan, and soon we'll be together again, and this time I won't fail you, Iroh, or anyone else ever again. Konoha was about to be rocked to its very core by this man's appearance alone. Konoha main gates. Standing at the gates were 2 chunin on guard duty, the #1 most hated job for any shinobi. It was the most boring thing any shinobi had to do. These 2 chunin were no exception, except for the fact this time their guard duty was about to get interesting. The wind suddenly blew past them as they saw a black cloaked figure coming in sight of them. They both felt a little tense seeing the strange cloaked figure. After all, a war was going on, so they were suspicious of what was around them. When the cloaked man was right in front of them though, they felt relieved to see it looked to be a normal person. That cost them greatly, since you don't judge a book by its cover. The man raised his head at them and flashed his eyes at them, and with a sudden pulse of wind they both flinched before falling back, passed out, eyes rolled to the back of their heads and foam coming out of their mouths. Looking down at the chunin, the man shook his head in disapproval. Pathetic was the only word the man said before he entered the village, masking his signature from the patrolling shinobi and barrier watchers. As the man came into Konoha, his eyes quickly surveyed all of the things in front of him, memorizing them perfectly. He saw all the civilians, the patrolling shinobi and the children all playing around like nothing was happening on the outside of these walls. The blissful smiles on their faces and carefree attitudes showed around him. The fools, arrogant in their belief they're invincible, and all because of a simple lie. Distaste and anger was full in his mouth. That's when he saw the Uzu no Kuni symbols upon their backs. The hatred in his eyes rose to monumental heights for that. That's when the man closed his eyes, reaching with his chakra sensory, trying to find the one person he came for. The slight widening of his eyes was the only reaction that was seen, but also the burning anger that flashed in his eyes also showed before his form just disappeared in nothing but a simple gust of wind. Appearing over in the trees above, the man's cloaked form was looking down at what seemed like a training ground sorts. But what he was looking at was what was important, for it was a total of 8 people in general, with 2 of them being Junin shinobi. He recognized the two Junin shinobi as Jiraiya of the Sennin and the other as Tsukumo Hatake. Looking at the others was a bunch of teenagers he didn't really care about right now. All he cared about right now was the two people in the middle of the training ground sparring. The first one was something that made him shocked a bit but shook it off. It was a teenager that had golden spiky hair with two large bangs coming down the sides of his face and his eyes were that of azure blue. He had a Chunin vest on and blue shinobi pants and a blue long-sleeved shinobi shirt with the vest over it. He finished of the look with blue shinobi sandals and a kunai pouch on his left thigh. The other person though was his greatest concern, for who he was looking at was losing pretty badly in the spar. It was a woman that by all means defined perfection. She had the height of 5 feet 8 with long silky maroon hair. Her face was perfectly heart-shaped with the greatest shade of violet anyone would ever see in her eyes. She had a perfect slender petite body with a bust showing at least small D cup. She was wearing the normal Konoha attire. As he watched her, he saw the dark marking upon the back of her neck which was invisible to many but, to him it was as clear as day. Thus it made him grit his teeth in anger knowing what that kind of seal was but, he did see the damage as was in it was halfway through breaking already. This made him smile since he knew that the only person to have put that seal on the woman was none other than Jiraiya and what a lousy job he did. You've grown so beautiful Kushina, and strong too, but that seal hinders all the power you had back then, and knowledge and memories of me as well. A female shout interrupted his musings. Looking down his eyes flashed brightly when he saw the blonde man teen doing hand seals toward a downed and exhausted form of Kushina. Recognizing the hand seals and looking to see Jiraiya letting it happen made him step into action. I don't want to do this but, on sensei's orders she must be held down and by pain if necessary. Jiraiya though watching what his student was about to do. He saw Tsukumo about to jump in only to give him a glare saying, no. That's when he saw the speed black blur pop out of the forest right when Minato shouted out his jutsu. Raiden. Toru no Hanma. Lightning release. Thor's hammer, he said before a massive lightning-shaped hammer shot out of the sky and directly as Kushina. It wasn't lethal but, it would assuredly would injure her greatly. Too bad since the black blur Jiraiya suddenly appeared in front of Kushina terrified form with his back facing her. When they all saw this they tried to stop the oncoming jutsu but, it would seem Minato put a tad too much chakra in that attack. Kushina herself watched this cloaked man appear in front of her about to take the hit that was meant for her. That was until she heard the man's voice. Don't worry Kushina-chan, I won't let you get hurt anymore. Was the words she heard him speak. It confused her but. That's when she felt she knew this voice before, as the lighting hammer came at them she held her head in pain. Flashback. Come on Kushina-chan, you're stronger than this I know it. You can do it Kushina-chan, you're strong I believe in you. You've gotten stronger Kushi-chan, soon you'll catch up to me. I love you, Kushi-chan, never forget, I'll always love you. Kushi-hime, never forget me. The same voice resounded this time showing just who this person was. It was a male that looked almost exactly like Minato only this person looked much more friendly than that Hokage crazed Namikaze. His blue-flecked golden slit eyes stared upon her with love something she hasn't felt before. That is until he spoke once more. Kushi-hime, do you remember the promise we made to each other? When we were just kids. That's when she saw to her shock she saw her younger 8-year-old self appear in front of her. She saw her grin widely before speaking. Of course I do. We promised we would get married when we were older and I always keep my promises Databane. Her younger self shouted before seeing the man himself smile and opened up his arms confused at the action she watched surprised when her younger self ran and jumped into his arms kissing his cheek. She for some reason felt a blush come upon her face. When she took in the whole man's body he looked so handsome, she could see his body was restrained by the clothing he wore and, his muscled and chiseled body was stretching the fabric of his clothing. That's when she felt someone looking at her so looking up she to her shock saw her younger self and the blonde Adonis looking at her with amused eyes. It's time you awoke, Kushina. Please awaken and remember. The blonde man started with her younger self taking over. Who you truly are, and remember the person we both loved all those years ago is by your side now. And with a final look from the two, they both spoke in unison. Awaken, Kushina. Flashback end. The seal on the back of Kushina's neck glowed rapidly while cracking even more before it shattered. Kushina suddenly saw so many things, remembered the places she's been, who she truly was, who her father was, everything. The final memory was of her and Naruto kissing before she was separated from him by Tsunade. Within her mindscape, when the seal shattered, the once bloodlust Biju Kyuubi was now blinking in confusion at the sudden rush of memories as well. When they finally passed, its giant red-crimson eyes widened with realization. Then its giant nine-tailed form glowed brightly before shrinking down to a more humanoid figure. When the glow dimmed, it showed a beautiful woman that tied with Kushina herself. She had the body of a goddess. Her perfect hourglass figure would make any straight man or gay die of a nosebleed. Her D-cup busy was out in full view, barely with much hidden by her royal blood-red kimono, though it showed much of her cleavage. She had long silky smooth red hair, it being a bit more lighter than Kushina's. Her face was carved from perfection and her eyes were that of a crimson red with a fox slit within. Smirking, showing her abnormally large fangs, the goddess-like woman spoke. I knew Naru-kun would come back, and from what I'm sensing from him, he's gotten a lot more powerful than he was 10 years ago. On the outside world, Kushina rapidly blinked her eyes, adjusting her head with the now revealed memories until she remembered the situation she was in. Looking up, her eyes widened at seeing the Raiden Jutsu just a foot away from the cloaked man who she knew was Naruto. GGGE, only to be cut off when the man spoke again. Don't worry, you might need to remember a bit more, but something as trivial as this can't even scratch me, he said, already knowing the seal on her neck was gone. She was silent as he raised his right hand palm outwards. Something weak would only give me a slight tingle. With that, to her shock and Kyuubi's surprise, he swung his hand. On the opposite side of the giant jutsu, Minato, Jiraiya, Tsukumo and the others watched horrified at what was about to happen. That guy needs to get out of there. Minato exclaimed, not wanting to have a civilian's death on his hands due to an accident. I agree, especially with a jutsu like that, it could kill not only him but Kushina as well. Tsukumo said. Wait. Something's not right. Jiraiya exclaimed with a narrowed-eyed look in his eyes. This god looks from them all. The teen with long dark raven hair and coal-black eyes wearing the same thing as Kushina, Uchiha Makoto and Kushina's best friend, stated. What do you mean? She said, only for a sound for Jiraiya's eyes to go wide greatly. She along with the others followed his gaze and saw what he was seeing. The giant lightning-shaped hammer were slowly sliced in half by the hand of the cloaked stranger. They watched as the man just literally swatted one of the most deadly Raiden jutsu known to all away like it was nothing. Many gawked at what they just seen, but the sudden explosion from the destroyed jutsu blew up, making smoke blow up around the cloaked stranger and Kushina. As the smoke cleared up, it showed the cloaked man standing exactly where he was, with Kushina looking at his form with so many emotions as was impossible to identify even one of them. Tears did swell up in her eyes for some reason, to the confusion of the Konoha nin. In Naruto-kun, she spoke hesitantly, wanting to know if the cloaked person before her was the same person she remembers from the sudden rush of memories that she made that promise to, the one she was in love with all those years ago. Before Konoha separated them, none of the Konoha knew what she said except for one person. Jiraiya, and his eyes were as wide as they could possibly be. The small flicker of fear was appearing in his eyes when he heard that man's name. All records and bingo books were destroyed with that man's name, so the next generation would never know of the one that scared the great Konohagakure so much. So it was with a great fear that Jiraiya stared at the cloaked figure with a look of extreme concentration rarely ever seen on the pervert's face before. Tsukumo saw this and got very tense of what was to come, since he too knew of Naruto and his legendary status and actions in the war dating back since he was but a child. It honestly scared him to his very soul. He's never met him but knew even he wouldn't win that fight. No matter how strong he was. You just can't beat someone that has beaten a Biju single-handedly. Naruto heard Kushina and a feeling of warmth filled his once cold emotionless body. Over the last 10 years he has forever closed up his heart and bent toward getting stronger, always training and never stopping. To getting stronger and gain the one he loved the most back, even if he reclaimed his title as the most feared being in all of the shinobi nations. So it was a quick surprise when Naruto's cloaked form turned to Kushina and kneeled before her. I told you, I'd come back for you, Kushina. It just took me a bit longer than I thought it would, he said, but she didn't care. She just smiled happily as tears went down her face. She didn't care how long it took Naruto to come back for her. All she cared about was that he was here now, and wouldn't be leaving her ever again. Though she did wonder what changes he's gone through over the last 10 years, no matter how much he changed, she knew it was Naruto from the same familiarity and power she knew when she was a child from back then was the same even now, if only much stronger and perfectly controlled than before. Though when she looked at his shadowed face she saw his eyes, they honestly sent a shiver down her spine. Seeing such eyes, she wasn't scared of them. If anything, she thought they made the mental image she had of him from before 10 years ago all the more handsome. Naruto-kun, can I see your face? It's been so long since I've seen you. I want to see your face again, the face of the same man I fell in love with all those years ago, she said with Naruto gently taking her hand, rubbing circles with thumb gently. My appearance? You wish to see it? He got a nod from her and with a simple flick of his hood, it fell completely off, showing the face of Uzumaki d. Naruto, aka the Kami no Saigai to Senso, god of disaster and war, and first ever Z-ranked shinobi in history. Jiraiya's face morphed into complete horror while his face quickly paled. It was like he was seeing a ghost from the past. The kid hadn't changed a single bit from 10 years ago. Indeed, Naruto's face was the exact same way as 10 years ago along with everything else. Kushina though could see the disguise on him and frowned. Having her memories come back made her old fiery personality from back then flare up, making her usual one Konoha nose pale in comparison. When she was about to speak, Naruto stopped her by holding his hand to her mouth. Wait, Kushi-chan, first we need to deal with these bastards. Konoha deserves to pay for taking you away from me, and they shall pay, he said, his eyes shadowed by his hair. Kushina's violet eyes softened before flickering her eyes over her team, and frowned. She always wondered why most of them had that look in their eyes when they talked or when they first met in the academy, but she had no doubt they were put up to become friends with her so she would feel welcomed into the village. Her eyes landed on the only one she trusted even now, and that was Makoto Uchiha. Despite her being of Konoha, she was still the most loyal person she has ever got the chance to meet. She couldn't possibly let Naruto kill her. Naru-kun, please, don't hurt Makoto, that's all I ask of you, she said, getting Naruto's attention. Looking down at the red head in his arms, he snapped his gaze at the Uchiha and made a mental note not to kill her. But I will keep my eye on you. Very well then. You have my word, he said, only for their moment to be ruined when they heard someone shout. You, what are you doing here? I thought we killed you. Jiraiya screamed in pure fear and outrage. Minato looked at his sensei in curiosity before asking. Sensei? What's wrong? Who is he? And how does he know Kushina Baka? He said, only to feel an unbearable pressure weigh upon him, making him gasp. Turning his head in that direction, he not only found the golden amber slitted eyes of Naruto glaring him down but also the violet ones of Kushina. Did you just call me a baka, Namikaze? Kushina said, spitting out the word Namikaze like it was poison. Minato gulped audibly. Don't fret, Kushi-chan. He is of no worry. He's as weak and pathetic as Konoha's other shinobi, Naruto said, knowing he insulted Konoha right in front of its very own shinobi. He got the reaction he wanted when the teen called Minato growled at him. What did you say? Why insult Konoha? What have we ever done to you? Naruto just blinked before chuckling. Standing up, Kushina watched when Naruto's chuckle turned from humor to hollow. It sent chills down many of their spines when they heard it, especially when his eyes seemed to glow faintly when Konoha was mentioned and of what they've done to him. You wanna know what they did to me? Hee boy, you have no idea. He shouted at the teen, making him take a step back. Konoha has all but angered me since I was a shinobi. They've lied, cheated and betrayed me and Kushina's clan for a century. He shouted louder this time. The Konoha nin all looked shocked except for Jiraiya, since he had a grim look on his face. They have angered me greatly over the years, but to take Kushina away from me was the last straw, he said quietly while grasping his cloak. Which they all caught, as did Kushina. When they took her from me 10 years ago, they all but destroyed any hope of salvation and have sealed their fate, with me delivering their punishment. With that, Naruto pulled off his cloak and in a shout of Kai, a massive pressure crashed onto all of Konoha nin except for Kushina and Makoto. As the smoke formed, they all saw a giant shadow before them, also pressure of some kind completely lessened to none. They all saw something akin to a handle sticking over his shoulder, making them think it was a weapon of some kind. When the smoke finally cleared up though, Kushina's face lit up like a Christmas tree, making the sun itself look deadly pale, while discreetly Makoto's face had a small pink hue as well, with it growing each passing second. Within Kushina mindscape, she could hear her old friend Kyuubi's screams at seeing Naruto's true form. By Kami, he's a giant Adonis. Kushi-chan, you'd better find a way for me to get out here so I can. The normally composed, now horny as hell Kyuubi was interrupted when Kushina's blushing face shouted mentally. Q-chan, I never knew you liked Naru-kun too. Well, we can have this conversation later, with Kyuubi cut mental connection, but there was already a big mental grin on Kushina's face, knowing her best and longest friend had feelings for her, Naruto. She looked upon the newly and to her true delight appearance of Naruto. She knew he had been hiding his true appearance, but she never knew he was hiding this. For in front of her and all of them was a man that by all standards was a giant, for he stood, at least from what they could tell, was 25 feet tall and muscular. Very muscular, if the sight of his muscles were the size of small boulders. His skin was a bit on the pale side, with it a bit darker than it was before, but still the same shade as Kushina's own porcelain skin. His 12-pack was full out, shown out to all, as were his pecs, and you could just tell you could hit him with a sledgehammer and it would shatter upon impact. His face was angular yet chiseled to perfection, carved by the gods themselves. His large arms were practically the size and width of an average-sized human. Though the other changes Kushina noticed were that of his hair, it was now surprisingly enough golden with black highlights within, with the spiky still there, only a little more tamed. His hair was long, with it going past his neckline and somewhat over his eyes. Though his golden amber slitted eyes now held a much more powerful look in them, making his appearance all the more intimidating. That's when they saw what he was wearing. Due to his large size, Naruto had to take matters into his own hands, where for his feat he had over the years had to take to learning a few professions like blacksmithing and tailoring. For now he was wearing his own custom-made clothing, starting with his black combat boots with black steel plating over the giant boots. Next up was his black cargo pants with the same metal plating, only this time integrated into the pants, making them much more durable but wouldn't hold back his speed. Next up was his chest, being completely shirtless except for the large tattered golden coat that hung loosely over his shoulders with torn off sleeves at the end. Upon the coat's back was the Uzumaki clan symbol in its full-out true glory, with the symbol for protector and guardian interlocking with the Uzumaki symbol. Lastly, on his right shoulder was a crimson-colored pauldron with a design of some kind of demon with curved horns. Its mouth was wide open, showing it was screaming in what seemed fear. That's when they saw the sword handle above the pauldron and wondered what was behind the mon's back. Kushina and Kyuubi saw it as clear as day though, and right now Kushina was having a hard time not drooling over the sight of what she was seeing. Since she had always been a kenjutsu master at heart, with only her fuinjutsu coming out first, the weapon she saw upon Naruto's back was absolutely breathtaking. By the gods above, Naru-kun got that weapon of all things. Kami is truly on his side. Q-chan, do you know what that weapon is? Yes. Hell, most of the underworld and heaven know what that weapon is, it's told in legends, but that blade was wielded by a being that fought demons and angels way back. Whoa, what's the sword called? Its name is rarely spoken of since it brings nightmares to many demons and hatred from most of heaven. Its name is